Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
What is the craziest real-life plot twist story you have? Episode 2.
This is a story about reuniting with my dad after 20 years. We decided to finally meet in July 2015 after a few years of Facebook comments and regular phone calls. He was coming from Missouri, and I was coming from California to meet in Oregon, where my sister lives. I was super nervous and beyond anxious, and overly excited. I felt like the odd one out in my family, and after talking to him for a few years, we became really close. When I was building my car, I'd call him, and he'd talk me through repairs and send me links and YouTube videos for every step. He tried to be a good dad despite the distance and was overly excited about finally getting to see me. He arrived the day before me to catch up with my sister and because he wanted to be there to pick me up from the airport. It was a Thursday afternoon when I arrived, and seeing him there at the gate when I walked out was seriously the most surreal experience ever. He was taller than I expected and was smiling from ear to ear. I hugged him and my sister, and we took off. It was awesome. My cousin was getting married on the following Saturday, and my sister had to work, so she dropped us off at my uncle's house that night so I could meet him too and help set up the wedding. My dad and I had a little time to bond and talk cars and hang out with my biker uncle. I was finally feeling comfortable and excited about my life. Happy to meet this other side of my family that I fit in so well with. Cue the wedding day. I've known my dad for a whole 2 days or so. I'm spending the day setting up everything, cooking, cleaning, trying to talk to my dad. He seemed really distant from me that day, kept wandering off and mingling with other people, inviting people into our conversations, asked me to make him food, generally acting like he had other stuff to do. I figured it was no big deal, but I was a little bit annoyed. The wedding happened, followed by an after-party that lasted all night and well into the next day, Sunday. For most of that time, my dad was off with a friend and was pretty much unavailable. I let it be and spent that time meeting a bunch of amazing people who were so happy I finally got to meet my dad. Monday morning rolls around and I wake up a little late. I made some coffee and sat outside waiting for my dad to get up. I was out there for an hour or so. It was weird that he wasn't up yet, as an early riser, usually up with the sun. Had a bad feeling about it, so I went to go check on him. Knocked on the door, no answer. Opened the door and called him, no answer. Walked up to the bed and shook him. He's dead. The rest of that day was terrible. I had to call my sister and tell her. I had to tell my uncle, and I was far from home. I called my boyfriend, of 7 years at the time, and he decided that I was cheating on him. I wasn't, and that he didn't want to talk to me. I was feeling alone and very out of place. I was completely dumbfounded. I couldn't cry, and I was now in the position of making funeral arrangements for my father that I had only known for 3.5 days. This event really messed me up. When I got home, I dropped out of college. My relationship with my boyfriend plummeted because he was a man when I needed him. I spent the next year working through my emotions and feelings for my dad, mourning somebody I never got to know, wondering what kind of luck I've been blessed with, saying what over and over until ran out of breath. In the end of 2016, I decided to bail from California and move to Oregon on super short notice. Sold my bikes and my car and had my sister come pick me up. I moved here to be closer to my dad's side of the family that was so kind to me when my dad died. I haven't looked back since. Kick-ass job, good man, and a baby on the way. I visit Haystack Rock, the Goonies beach, where we scattered my dad's ashes every year on the anniversary. I have no regrets, but that was probably the craziest plot twist of my life.
I'm in a room with a bunch of friends, and we're supposed to be productive, but that never happens. All the boys are causing a huge ruckus, even knocking down a few tables while us girls were quietly playing card games in the back. We shared the building with a bunch of secretaries and nuns who absolutely despised us and would do everything possible to get us kicked out of the building. So, a few minutes after table number 2 gets toppled, the girls are all warning the boys that we'll all get in trouble if they don't quit it. Well, barely moments after that, one of the secretaries walks in the room, looks at the loudest boy dead in the eye, points, and says quietly, "When you have a moment, come meet me in my office." Well, now we're all panicking, fearing that the boy just got us kicked out of the building, and we really needed that building, since it was the only one that could accommodate us for free. With fear radiating from his entire body, he leaves to go to the office. After 10 minutes or so, some younger kids walk in our room where we're still panicking and tell us the boy was on the phone with his parents, and it sounded serious. This just sends us into an even bigger frenzy. Finally, the boy returns to our room, holding a bright layoff notice. At first, he looks traumatized, and we're all begging him to tell us what happened. He grins widely and says, "She asked me to serve a mass tomorrow."
My husband's parents are kind of a couple of ne'er-do-well hillbillies who have each been married several times. He and his brother are the children of both parents' first marriage, when the parents were both around 20. They have no other siblings, but have had many step-siblings come and go through the years, with my husband, being the eldest, often having to babysit various step-siblings. From even before husband and I met, there were rumors in the family that his dad had cheated on his mom while they were married and had a daughter, so my husband's half-sister, that my husband had never met. Like, he had avoided dating women from his hometown of a certain age range because one of them was his sister, but he didn't know who. Well, a few years ago the half-sister emerged and said she wanted to get to know her brothers. And it turns out she wasn't a stranger at all. My husband and Bil knew her as one of their stepsisters. See, my father-in-law had cheated on his wife with a married woman and gotten her pregnant. When the husband of said woman found out, he divorced her and, out of pure spite, married the homewrecker's ex-wife and baby mama. So, the half-sister moved in with her bio dad's ex-wife, my mother-in-law, and my future husband and Bil got to know her as a non-birth related stepsister. When this spite-based marriage shockingly fell apart, they lost touch, having no idea that they were more closely related than they thought until the guy she thought was her dad confessed on his deathbed to what happened. Country life is wild, y'all.
When we were in college, my friend matched with a slightly older guy on Tinder and hit it off with him immediately. They scheduled a date for Friday night, and she texted me about how excited she was about it. Friday comes and goes, and they have an amazing time, even agree to meet up the next afternoon for another date, and they text until late that night with him telling her how much he likes her and can't wait to see her again. The next day, radio silence. She's so confused and texts him a couple of times to figure out what's going on, but he never gets back to her. The day after that, she tries again, this time to make sure nothing bad has happened, but still nothing. I'm out of town and texting her to keep her anxiety in check, but finally she asks me to call his number just to see if his phone is broken or something. I agree, convinced that my call will go straight to voicemail or something and I'll hang up immediately. Nope, he notices the first ring for an unknown number. And after I hung up, he texts my number to ask who it is. So, his phone isn't broken, and I have no answers for my friend. She's understandably upset but gets over it quickly since there's nothing she can really do. About 6 months later she sent me a link to his Facebook profile that just popped up on her suggested friends list. Turns out, he's married. Has been for a couple of years. His drop-dead gorgeous wife was doing Doctors Without Borders in a country in Africa during the time he went out with my friend. And while his wife is saving lives overseas, he hopes on Tinder to mess around with college girls. So that finally explains the ghosting.
I'm on dating sites looking for love. I'm on one site that I really liked but having no luck. A really hot guy, we'll call him Peter, hits me up. He's 10 years younger. Sexy talk nonstop. I ask if he's really looking for a relationship. He admits he's not. I'm not really looking to play around, but he's so hot. We are making plans for Saturday. Meanwhile, I'm still making dates with potential long-terms my age. My mom tells me try XXX site as that's where my sister met her husband. I go on, meet a couple guys, including Paul. Instant connection. He wants to meet up, but I have dates lined up through the weekend. Saturday comes. I have my period. I cancel with Peter and immediately text Paul, my night freed up. Can you meet up? We hit it off. Second date for Wednesday night. Wednesday comes, we go to his favorite bar. He looks at his phone and says to me, "Oh, this is great. My nephew is on his way. We're only 4 years apart. We're really close." I look over and in walks Paul. He must have seen my face because he says, "You know him?" I canceled my date with him to go out with you.
During my first year of high school, my sister gifted me a Bible. It was leather-bound, and she'd written inspiring inscriptions on the leaves and underlined various verses that meant something to her. During my senior year of high school, I was in a bad car accident. I mean bad. I almost died and spent the majority of the year in the hospital or rehab, plus a chunk of the next year. Years pass. I find the Bible on a bookshelf. I'm flipping through the pages when I find some random numbers written on one of leaves, separated by dashes. It was a date. It was the date of my car accident, which occurred 3 years after I was given the Bible. I later asked my sister about it, and she didn't remember why she'd written that.
I worked in a lab. We had several principal investigators, big cheese scientists who pulled down a lot of grant money, overseeing employees in the same space. There was a PI there named Brian. One of our most senior graduate students was named Karen. She had a husband she had been with since high school, Steve. Karen had been with the lab for a long time. She got pregnant with her second child. We did a name board where we suggested names for the babe. Silly names like Stivette or whatever. We would laugh and joke and get rowdy about it. One day the lab manager comes in and just quietly removes the board. Just shrugs at me and doesn't say anything. Time rocks on and it's time for the baby to arrive. I come into work and a coworker tells me, Karen's at the hospital having the baby. Brian is there with her. Steve is not. I responded, well, does Steve need a ride? Come on, let's go get him. They stared at me in silence for a good 6 to 10 seconds before I understood. 5A. This happened about 12 years ago. One day we were all sitting down for dinner and the phone rang. Dad picks it up and it's my paternal grandpa, my dad's dad. He just called to let my dad know that his dad just died. So we all sit there like, what? Dad's dad just called to tell my dad that his dad died. Then who is Grandpa? After a little conversation, Grandpa told us that my deceased grandma confessed to him that all those extended trips to visit family in Tennessee, 3 months at a time, twice a year, were actually to spend time with her second husband, actually my grandpa's cousin. And that my dad was actually Tennessee husband's kid, along with one of my aunts. So, Grandma had about 12 kids. When one was born in one state, she would tell that state's husband it was his. Then when she switched states, she would tell that husband that she had lost the baby. So, I have a whole slew of cousins, aunts, uncles that I never knew existed because my grandma lived 2 lives. My dad was well into his 50s at the point of learning this. Talk about plot twists.
Last year, my dad almost passed away a few weeks before my wedding, had been battling cancer for years. He had major complications from surgery and was just not well. He ended up needing a second emergency surgery after massive blood loss around 2 weeks after the initial surgery. Fortunately, he was able to come to my wedding. Unfortunately, he has since passed. Last month, I needed to hire a nurse to work under me at the nonprofit I work at. I got great vibes off one candidate and really pushed to hire her. On her first day we were chatting, and my dad's recent passing came up. When I mentioned I was lucky to have him at my wedding because he almost didn't make it due to being in the hospital for the 2 months prior, she made the strangest face. She was his nurse the night he almost bled out. She found him and pushed for the residents to come and check him. I never met her because she works overnights. She saved his life. Honestly believe that without her, he might not have been there. She never knew what happened to him because he bounced around different units in the hospital for the next 5 weeks. All she knew was everyone told her that he would never have his daughter's wedding. But he did. I didn't meet my dad or find out the truth about him until I was 18. I spent my whole life believing he left my mother when she told him she was pregnant with me because he actually had a wife and 2 sons, which is true, but what she didn't tell me was that when I was 2 years old he came back wanting to make amends and be a part of my life. My mother then panicked at this unexpected visit, and I guess the fiercely overprotective side of her acted irrationally and in the heat of the moment told him that I wasn't his child. Granted, it was an odd thing to do and changed the course of my life. Fast forward 16 years, my relationship with my mom was on shreds and it boiled down to all the resentment I had for her about my dad and how I just knew she wasn't telling me everything. So, one day after a huge argument she finally sat me down and told me the whole truth. It turns out that my dad actually worked at my school and one of my half-brothers was in the year above me, also at the same school. My mom and dad were neighbors growing up. Their parents owned farms next door to each other and sometimes pooled farming resources to save money. Mom moved about an hour away as a teenager and they went to different schools. When they were about 18 they met up and started dating. Dad cheated on Mom and knocked up the girl he was cheating with. He did the right thing and married Side Piece. Side Piece turned out to be a psycho and harmed baby. They divorced, but it was the 70s and Dad wasn't able to get custody. In their 30s Mom and Dad met again and started dating, got married and had 6 kids together. 10 years in, Mom finds out Dad is cheating with secretary. She finds out through town gossip and confronts him. He denies it until Mom catches them cheating. Mom tells Dad if he leaves secretary, all is forgiven. Dad refuses and moves in with secretary. 10 years later, Mom hears through town gossip, secretary is cheating on Dad. The secretary leaves Dad for Side Piece and has a kid in her 40s. Now just have to wait for karma to catch up with the secretary for being an awful human being. When my grandpa, Dad's dad, died and we were going through his stuff, we found all these tax returns listing 2 dependents from before he married my grandma. We asked my dad about it, but he was grieving and didn't want to investigate. After a few months we all kind of forgot. A year later my dad gets a call from a random woman claiming she's his half-sister. This woman grew up thinking she was raised by her bio parents, but her mom confessed on her deathbed that she was actually from a first marriage, so she had been raised by her mom and stepdad. So, this lady goes on the internet and finds my grandpa's obituary, through which she finds my dad, a quick Google search and the rest is history. I have a new aunt. The crazy thing is that my grandma never knew that grandpa was married and divorced before he met her, but everyone else did and never said anything. My grandpa's family watched him get a divorce and leave his wife and daughter, and then remarry and never said anything about it. My dad is almost 60 and no one told him he had a sister. Even worse, in all that time my grandma never knew she had a stepdaughter. My friend and I were hanging out at the mall, and it was about to close. So instead of walking all the way back to the exit, we decide to go out of one of those emergencies exits that leads to a stairwell in the parking garage. It's one of those gated stairwells with a metal door at the bottom. We find the underlying cause of the stairs and the door is locked. So, we're just like, oh no, I guess we have to walk back to the actual exit, so we walk back up the stairwell to the emergency exit door, except it's locked too. So I am starting to freak out. We're trapped in a parking garage stairwell, people are leaving the mall and it's starting to get dark. My friend tells me to chill and claims he can break down the door at the bottom of the stairs with some ridiculous karate move. He doesn't know karate. So, he tried and failed and blames it on the stairs, of course. So, I'm yelling help, help. And keep in mind, like 20 minutes pass and the parking garage is basically empty. Okay, so then we turn around, and what do we see? A scary homeless man. I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm like, what do we do? You know? And then my friend, he's just like, just chill. And I'm like, how do we chill, dude? I'm all, oh, shit. He's going to talk now. And my friend says, how do you know he's going to talk, bro? And I'm like, because his mouth is opening. And then he talked. And then the scary homeless guy says, I'll let you out of the stairwell because I have the key, because I'm the security guard instead. I worked with this woman, we'll call her Jill, who was around the same age as me, 22, who got a DUI one weekend and didn't come in to work the next day. She then went to the doctor and came back telling us that she had a brain tumor near her cerebellum and that if they tried to remove it she'd likely end up paralyzed. It was heartbreaking and she always looked sick, but she kept coming into work even while she was receiving radiation. Then she just stopped showing up and we got worried, so we tried to reach out and she wouldn't answer her phone, and her parents wouldn't let us know if she was okay, etc. So, we ended up having to just ask some of the people we work with if she was okay, and they said yes, and we sent her a letter of job abandonment. Fast forward 6 months, she's kind of lost touch with the women who were her best friends and one, we'll call her Kelly, starts to get suspicious that something is up. So, Kelly tries reaching out over and nothing comes of it until finally Kelly messages Jill's sister on Facebook to ask her how Jill's treatment is going and if she got into some study she said she'd been accepted into. Then Jill's sister messages Kelly back and says something like, holy shit, I can't believe she's still lying about this. She doesn't have cancer, she made it up and my parents kicked her out. She's actually just an alcoholic and is drinking a lot of coke with her boyfriend. So, we think she made it up to make the symptoms of those things seem justified. I'm the new pilot at first base. TSGT, Technical Sergeant, E6 in the Air Force, Guy McGuffey, hereby MG, is my sponsor. A sponsor's job is to set up a dorm room, pick you up from the airport, help you process the base, etc. I'd got myself there and had set up my place to stay before I arrived, so that wasn't necessary. MG showed me the ropes. He was in the same career field as me, so he helped train me. My job specialty, the computer system we entered data into, the training programs I fell under. All was well for about a year. MG started having troubles at work. Would be missing for hours at a time. We worked based out of an office, but we're aircraft maintenance, so we'd frequently be on the flight line or out coordinating with support agencies, so this wasn't as alarming as it first sounds. MG had to speak to the commander to address this but was late to his appointment because he fell asleep in his truck in the commander's parking lot. Not the craziest thing, but missed appointments are important in the military. MG is scolded, threatened, life goes on. Now, about 4 months later, MG goes missing and our mid-level leadership won't utter his name. It turns out that MG had gone down to minor city and got caught up in a sting operation by soliciting an agent asking if she offered a military discount for her services. And handed her his military ID. So, he was arrested, and his vehicles impounded, leaving his wife, with baby, without a vehicle. At the impound lot the vehicle was searched, and methamphetamine was found in the vehicle. This was brought up at MG's court hearing, which both his wife and girlfriend were attending, with each of their babies in tow. That's right, folks, the plot twist here is that he had two separate families going simultaneously. The shocker is that the girlfriend wanted to make things work and didn't care about the wife. The wife was done, BTW. MG has been out of the military now for several years, after his release from prison. My grandmother is a pathological liar. When I was growing up, she told all these stories about how our family used to be part of a prominent clan in Scotland, but we were betrayed and the clan that served as the guard to the Scottish royal family helped the English lead a purge against us. A few escaped and made it to America, swearing a blood feud against the guard. This would have been around 1800. I have no idea whether Scotland would have a royal family at that point, but I ate this stuff up as a child only to realize as a teenager that it was likely weird. When I was on a youth retreat at 16, I was swapping fun stories with a counselor who was a few years older than me. I tell him my fun blood feud story, and he tells me that in fact, his family betrayed a close ally to the English and had thought they exterminated them, only to get run out of Scotland a few generations later. They weren't royal guards but were a military family. The plot twist here is that something my grandmother said was at least partially true, but it's a fun story and I love to tell it. And before anyone asks, no, I did not kill him, much to the chagrin of my Scottish ancestors. Was in a WoW guild with a couple who lived somewhere down south. They had a female friend that would play with us now and again. One day we get the sad news that the husband and the female friend both died in a car crash. We of course assumed they were having an affair and wrecked while on a date or something. Nope, much weirder. Turns out the female friend was just an alt account for the husband. And he wasn't just playing as a female character, he was a cross-dresser and played the female character when he was dolled up like a lady. But nope, the weird doesn't stop there. Evidently there was no car crash. The wife found the husband in the closet after he inadvertently killed himself doing autoerotic asphyxiation. Felt so sorry for my wife. They were all really nice, but she was particularly sweet. And the way the story came out slowly shows just how embarrassed and upset she was by the whole situation. I have an ex-girlfriend that I met when she was 25. At 18 she overheard her mother speaking on the phone with a family member and became suspicious that her father was not her real father. She took a hair sample to conduct a paternity test without telling her parents. The test came back that the man she knew as her father was her biological father. Later, after we had broken up, but were still friends, she was 30 at this time, we were talking and she told me that a man had contacted her and said he thought he might be her father. They met up and it was the identical twin of her father. Apparently, her mother and father dated a long time but broke up at one point. Her mother started to date her father's brother for about 6 months but broke up with him to go back to my ex's father. She got pregnant at the point of the breakup and couldn't be sure which man had fathered the child. I find it interesting that her father might not be the one who fathered her, but is in fact her biological father, since both brothers share the same DNA. It doesn't depress her, but she was angry her mother never told her the story, or that she had an uncle she had never heard of. Grandparents died when she was incredibly young, and her father's brother was not active with the family as the brothers had a falling out over the pregnancy. The summer after I graduated high school, we found out that the man we believed to be my dad's real father actually wasn't and that it was a huge family secret that my grandmother and step-grandfather took to their graves. My dad also has 7 half-siblings, 5 sisters, 2 brothers, from his biological father. My dad's best friend had gone to his wife's high school reunion, and she had gone to school with one of my dad's half-brothers. My half-uncle randomly came up to Dad's friend's wife, after having a few beers, started to talk with them and told them a story that his dad used to tell him and his siblings about a half-brother that they'd never met. The details sounded exactly like my dad and grandparents, and when the news broke and everyone delved further into the story, everything checked out. My dad's half-siblings had been tracking us for about a year but didn't reach out because they were afraid of what would happen if they did. How they found out about us is an even wilder story. After their mom, bio-grandpa's wife, he was long gone by this point, passed away, they were cleaning out her house and found a letter she had written and left for them to find telling them who my dad and his family were. It had my grandma's name, dad's name and birthday and the address of the house my parents lived in when I was a toddler. One of my half-aunts is married to the man who was mayor of the town I grew up in the entire time I was going to school there. Another half-aunt and her family at one point went to the church we did when I was little, right around the time we stopped going. The half-uncle who brought this out of the woodwork was at one point dating a woman who lived on my mother's post office route. Another half-aunt died on my 14th birthday before we all knew about each other, and in family pictures that I've seen, I look exactly like my oldest half-aunt, her daughter and one of her granddaughters. Crazy stuff, man.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.